Okay, I think I'm live, but I know no one is here because... Great, good stuff. And I can't get my own video. Good start. Good start. This is going to be an exciting episode, fellas. I need to send this link to Mark. That's not the right... No clipboard. All right. Rough start, fellas. Give me a moment. I'm a bit scrambled here. Things aren't working the way they're supposed to be working. I can't even... This is frustrating me. This is frustrating me. There we go. Jesus Christ. All right. I don't know when Mark will be joining. Now my computer's just frozen. Awesome. Okay. Oh, because I signed out. Jesus Christ. All right. Bear with me, folks. This is a very rough start. I apologize. Am I about to dox myself? Is it going to show my phone number and stuff? This is fun. I need to get this sent to Mark before I do anything so he can even join the show. Meant to do this before I went live, but my OBS was acting up. There we go. All right. All right, there we go. Okay, fellas. I don't know if anyone's in here. I am live. So there's that. There's 3 people watching. That's cool. Looks like you guys found the new link. Whatever. This is... All right, whatever. Let's... So like I said, I don't know when Mark is going to be joining. He said he might be running a little late. He possibly read that in the email. Hey Trent, glad you're witnessing me, just struggle for 5 minutes straight. But yeah, Mark Palmer, my family thinks I'm crazy, is going to be joining the podcast tonight, but not exactly sure when. Nothing is working tonight. Absolutely nothing is working tonight. I'm struggling, and I can't get this out of full screen. There we go. Jesus Christ. It's good getting the issues out of the way before Mark gets here, because this is the biggest mess so far, I think, except for the one night I streamed to myself for 40 minutes straight. That was pretty fun, too. All right. So Mark Palmer, my family thinks I'm crazy, is going to be joining us at some point tonight. Might be 5:30. We'll see. But I got the link sent to him so he can call in whenever he's ready. Here is the link. Here's the link for the Zoom, which, yeah, whatever. I'm just realizing the previous links I posted on Discord aren't viable anymore. I'm not even going to worry about it. I'm just going to keep rolling, I guess. I don't know. That was a... Yeah, whatever. I'm not going to worry about it. It is what it is. And I've broken... All right. I'm not going to mess with anything anymore because I'm just going to keep breaking stuff. So, Mark's coming on, as I've said for 10 times now. Hopefully we'll be talking about the hidden history of America, but, you know, he can, whatever he talks about should be cool. I'm into a lot of the same stuff he's into. We seem to think along the same lines on a lot of things, so, but definitely diverge a little bit, so I think it should be a good conversation. Phone lines, as always, are open. You know, you can call in now if you wish, and then I'll probably hang up on you when Mark shows up, or you can wait for Mark and call in then. It's up to you guys. I've got a few small, interesting things to talk about. Hopefully they'll fill the time until Mark gets here. I didn't prepare a whole lot because I was, you know, having a guest, so didn't prepare an entire episode without one. But the Nephilim clowns seem to be blowing up right now. There's a lot of... They seem to be popular on the internet currently. And Mind Unveiled, one of the channels I enjoy, just released a video on it. It wasn't particularly revelatory. It was mostly a summary of the work by Conspiracy Explained, Conspiracy Unveiled, Conspiracy something. So something along those lines. I'm blanking on the exact name of the channel. But he's got, I've mentioned him before, he's got an entire podcast dedicated to this topic. He's been doing it for years now. And I found something that I haven't heard anyone else mention on the Nephilim clowns thing, and I'll attempt to pull it up. Hopefully I won't break more stuff. There is, Li Ching Yuan, a 256-year-old Chinaman. And let me see if I can... There's an image of him there. There's a photograph of him. There's some very interesting things about this guy, besides the fact that he was 256 years old, besides the fact that he was, you know, around in modern times, modern enough that there's color photography of him, right? There's records of this guy. This guy was 7'1". This Chinaman, 7 foot even, according to Wikipedia. He was 7 feet tall. So 7 feet tall is a giant by any standards. And in China, especially, that's insane. And he lived to 256 years old. So there's a few things about this story. It's disregarded by gerontologists, which it's funny to me that such a thing as gerontologists even exist. People who are experts in old people. I don't know. That's funny to me. But he died May 6, 1933. He was a Chinese herbalist, martial artist, and tactical advisor known for his supposed extreme longevity. So he served for the military. Let's see if I can find this here. Timeline of lifespan. This is what I was looking for. So Born in 1677, age 13, he set out into the mountains. At age 51, he served as a tactical and topography advisor in the army of General Yu Zonghui. So there's a paper trail of this guy, right? He was in the army. He's 7 feet tall. Don't forget the fact that this is a 7-foot tall Chinaman. This guy stands out. You are not mistaking this guy for anyone else. You're not like there's no fudging of records of like someone else taking over his identity or anything along those lines. And it's not even it's hard for me to even believe that, the stories are just faked. Like, people would remember a 7-foot tall Chinaman. Dude's a giant. So he served in the army at 51. Even if you want to argue over his birth date, say he was 20 when he joined the army, he'd still be over 250 years old. So he got multiple letters congratulating him for his age from the Chinese government. So this was, again, there's paper trails. The guy's a giant. There's no, I haven't done a super deep dive into this guy's life. I want to see what else I can dig up on this guy. But the fact that a 7-foot tall Chinaman lived to 256 years old is pretty insane to me. And there's other people who have supposedly lived very long times. They're also disregarded. They're also just going, no, that didn't happen. That's an impossibly long time. This guy seems legit, though. So, why? It's the classic. It's just how science works. Anything that doesn't fit the narrative is obviously garbage that needs to be disregarded. But how this fits into Nephilim clowns, right? The offspring of these angel-human hybrids were the Nephilim, these giants, which according to the Bible were like 429 feet tall or something like that, at least originally. This would be pre-flood, right? The flood was to wipe out these Nephilim giants. So we're talking at least over 12,000 years ago. It's hard for me to believe that large, 429 feet, we're dealing with records over 12,000 years ago. The units getting mixed up seems pretty likely across that kind of time period, that kind of time span. So I don't think they were 429 feet. But you have Goliath in the Bible, who's well post-flood, but he's a giant, right? And I think there's different claims for his height. Some of them are like 9 feet, some of them whatever. But yeah, you have this guy, 7 feet tall, 256 years old. If ever there was evidence of a, superior, I say superior because they were bigger and stronger, but they were also corrupted, so don't put too much emphasis on, the word superior there. But these superior beings, can't think of a much better example than Li Chongzhuan or whatever, Li Qingwen. I want to look more into this guy's life. I want to see what else I can find on this guy, but I don't see why as far as I can tell, gerontologists, old folks experts, refute his claim purely on the fact that it's too old to be true. It couldn't possibly be true because we know no one can live 256 years. I don't believe they've actually found anything wrong with his story. As far as I know, the guy was in the military 200 years ago, before his death, well over 200 years ago now, but, Yeah, I need to figure out how to save that as the setting because it defaults back to that every time. Thank you, though, Mr. Slav. The Orientals are proof that aliens not only landed on Earth, but also crossbred with humans, like how they behave. I've heard the same thing for white people, though. I've heard the exact same claim for white people. And I've heard the claim for both together, that, you know, the Asians were one alien race and the white people were another alien race that was, yes, bred with the hominids, pre-hominids, apes, whatevers that were already here. And this potentially goes back like hundreds of millions of years. I just said his name in my head, but before I could get it out of my mouth, I forgot it. But this guy who's written, you know, like 100 different books, he's got several on Uparts, and he thinks that there was some type of civilization around, whether it be alien or human, or aliens and humans around 300 million years ago, because I mentioned it in the Uparts episodes. I could do hours of content purely on objects found in rocks, man-made objects found in rocks. We're talking multiple vases and just all kinds of things that are in these rocks that are supposed to be hundreds of millions of years old, and they've got modern man-made objects in them, or seemingly modern man-made objects in them. You know, I do come from a very long living, you know, breed stock, so maybe it's quite possible. She hasn't proven you wrong yet, so could be Mr. Slav. There was what were the okay? So one of my chair's pulling on my cord here. Sorry, apologize about that. I mentioned a few weeks ago a video from History for Granite about the Great Pyramids, and I was talking about how I think him and a few others are really doing an excellent job of narrowing the focus of what was actually going on the Giza Plateau 4,000+ years ago. And he came out with part 2. I was a little disappointed to see that it had nothing to do with the multiphasic building of the Great Pyramid, which I still like that idea. I thought it was pretty compelling. And it was both a revelatory and completely boring video at the same time, because the big revelation that he made in this video was that the Great Pyramid of Giza was Khufu's tomb. So not really much change to the narrative, although the slight adjustment that he did make was the idea that these tombs were not made to be these impenetrable fortresses. You know, it really wouldn't take that much effort to tunnel inside the pyramids with destructive means, and people ended up doing that eventually, much later after they were built, but it did happen several times to all of the pyramids. So his idea is, rather than trying to be these impenetrable fortresses and keeping people out with curses and stuff like that, was the idea that these were actually places of worship. We know that there were entire compounds built around these pyramids originally. Much of this is gone today, but you can still see the remains of some of the temples in front of the pyramids. So they were places of worship. We know that, but he's suggesting that that was the main security measure, was just having people around. People actually entering the pyramid and going into the pyramid, not into the burial chamber. That would have been sealed off, according to his theory. But other parts of the pyramid would have been open. People would have been able to enter, leave offerings, you know, pray, do whatever they want to this God King. And it does make it quite difficult to tunnel through granite and limestone when you've got people around you worshiping, you know, the God King in this middle of this granite and limestone. So yeah, not super crazy, really just cementing this idea a little more solidly. I think that these YouTube archaeologists have done far more in the last few years than mainstream Egyptology has accomplished in decades. I had been saying that they are really narrowing in. I think they're really getting somewhere into actually, maybe not definitively, because that's a very strong word, but very strongly making a good, strong argument for the purpose and the methods and everything else with the Great Pyramids of Giza. I agree with his assessment, or at least I thought it was extremely reasonable. I couldn't find any flaws in his reasoning as I watched it. So I think that's cool. I know a lot of people are going to be disappointed because they like the idea of power plants or landing pads for these ancient aliens we were just talking about a minute ago, or any other kinds of fun. Is that okay? In 5 minutes. Looks like Mark's inviting me to a meeting. You know, it will hopefully... I don't know if you guys will be able to call in unless... Mark, and will I... Now that I just clicked off that pop-up, is that gone forever? Did I just lose the invite? I don't know. I think I did. I think I just disappeared the invite. So, Mark, if you're watching, I guess re-invite me when you're... Let me check my email real quick and see if he's communicating through there. Okay, doesn't look like it. So, yeah, Mark, if you're watching, hopefully I sent you the link for the other stream that I messed up. Hopefully you found your way to this one. I also sent you an invite to this meeting, so you're welcome to join this meeting. Hopefully we get it figured out. Hopefully it works. All right, let me read these comments. There's one last thing I have to talk about, just in case, you know, takes a while to figure things out with Mark. Yeah, well, so the metric units are really, really interesting, and I might talk about that a little bit. But what was the unit of measurement when the Nephilim were first created over 12,000 years ago? We have no idea when they were created, to be clear. All we know is that it was over 12,000 years ago, because that was when the flood was, and the flood was to get rid of them. So what metric of measurement? I have no idea. That's why I'm saying it probably can't be trusted, the 429 feet, which I'm not even sure that's the exact right number, but it was a massive number like that. Probably not accurate. So were the Nephilim giants? Probably. Were they 400 plus feet tall? No. Yeah, it would be really cool to see that. I am really glad that YouTube people, not these experts, not these, you know, professional archaeologists and everything else, but there's Mark Rober, maybe, that I don't feel like that's the right name. That's a YouTuber name, but I don't think that's the name I mean to say. But there's a lot of people that are actually doing this practical archaeology now and are recreating these things from the past, and doing so. I mean, ClickSpring, who I gush about on this channel, is recreating the Antikythera mechanism using methods that would have been available 2,500 years ago in Greece. And so, you know, people like that are doing so much more. People like History for Granite, who's not even doing anything practical. He's not, but he's doing real archaeology, more archaeology than the archaeologists are. And then you get people who are even cooler than History for Granite, like the ClickSpring, who are actually making things. It's a very interesting time, because there's a very noticeable shift in I don't know what words to use, but the driving force of knowledge is leaving the hands of the experts, and it's being turned over to random people on YouTube, which is I don't know. I mean, I'm glad that progress is being made. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. The fact that progress is being made is good, and I guess less institutionalization means less control and less corruption. So probably a good thing. It's exciting though. I mean, getting closer to the truth is always good. For the tall Chinaman, well, I don't. It's 7 feet. What do you mean? Like, he died in 1933, and I believe they're on metric, but that it's still 7 feet. So I'm not sure I understand the question. There was one last thing that I did have to talk about, but I'm really hoping Mark and I figure this out, because I don't actually remember what it is. I'm going to break my Zoom again and have to rejoin again. Yeah, I'm gonna. Everything about this is frustrating. I can't see my own videos on my own YouTube channel. I have to log out of my YouTube channel and search my videos from a different YouTube channel in order to see my own videos. So I'm trying to send the new link, because Mark only has the old link. I don't know if he's made it over to here or not. He only has the old YouTube link for the old stream, which isn't actually streaming. Send. Okay, there we go. Gonna send off. Nothing's working the way I want it to tonight. Nothing's working the way I want it to tonight. There's no good way to do any of this. All right. I apologize. I know this is really, really riveting content here. But I would really like to get Mark on the show, especially since he has taken the time. I mean, he sent me that invite. He's clearly trying to do the show, and I don't want to waste his time. I don't want to, but just nothing is working. Okay. I'm going to restart the meeting and resend a link to Mark, and hope we can get something going here. Hopefully it'll be smooth sailing from here. But really wasn't metric. I'll talk a little bit about metric system while I try and get Mark on here. So the metric system, there's the argument of people saying that the speed of light and all of this stuff is encoded in the Great Pyramid. And then one of the most common arguments against that is, well, that's ridiculous because that's ridiculous. It can't have encoded all of this stuff because they weren't using the same units of measurement that we do. How can you encode the speed of light when the measurements are all different? The measurements of the speed of light, right? Because yes, it's a constant, but a constant in what measurement, right? Same thing with the distance of the pyramid, the size, all this stuff, right? So, okay, there is an answer to that. There is an answer to that, and that is the metric system. You go, well, the metric system wasn't created until whenever it was created. I really have no idea. The thing is, the metric system is based off of the Earth. I don't have a perfectly good understanding of it, but hopefully I have a good enough understanding that I can explain it a little bit. A pendulum swings once a second, at least on Earth, right? So a pendulum swings once a second, and I believe a meter or a kilometer or something like that is the distance. I could be really off here, but it's something along these lines at least. It's like the distance the Earth rotates in that 1 second, in that one pendulum swing. That's a meter. And then all of these other metric measurements, or at least many of them, are again based off of these natural phenomena in our Earth that are constants. So we found these constants. The whole idea of the metric system was, what would be a universal measuring system? What would, if we were to build a measuring system and then hope that 20,000 years later, if someone else were to take on the task of also building a measuring system that would be this universal language understood by everyone potentially, that they would come to the same answer, right? So that's what the metric system is. It is meant to be. Yeah, but that's not, and that is, I believe, the most recent definition. That is not the original source of the meter, though. That's not how we originally came to what a meter is. And I could be wrong, but it's something kind of like the distance the Earth travels in 1 second, one pendulum swing. And so when you convert these numbers to the metric system, and I think the cubit may have been it's been a while since I've looked into this. I'm just talking about this on the fly, so forgive me. The cubit may or may not be a divisible part of the meter, but regardless, these numbers that they're getting for the speed of light and all of the other encoded information, they are using some form of the metric system. So it's not like they were using cubits and we're using feet and then we're multiplying these things and oh look, it just happens to line up. There actually is, at least potentially, because there's debates on, well, how big is the pyramid, right? There's debates on that. We don't even have the casing stones, but then there's also a foundation. There's arguments about these numbers. So do they truly perfectly match up and encode this information? That's definitely highly debatable. But the argument of, well, they weren't even using the same measuring system, so it's meaningless, that actually doesn't hold up. There's a good case to be made that if there is information encoded, that's an encoded in metric. It's encoded in this method of measuring that potentially is universal and could be understood across thousands of years. So, all right. I haven't seen another invite. It's definitely, I'm pretty sure, been over 5 minutes since he sent that last invite. Really hoping I can get Mark on. Really hoping this goes and I'm able to get him on, because I was really looking forward to this, and I'd be quite frustrated with myself if I messed it up by double clicking the I'll be quite disappointed in myself. So really hoping Mark comes on. The Russian units of measurement, is this potentially related to Tartaria in any way? What was the all right, so going back slightly to the old man, the old Chinaman, 256-year-old guy, I really do want to take some time and actually dig into his story and see what I can find, see if I can actually find records and whatever, like how from a brief overview, a brief reading, there's multiple photographs of this guy. There's military records and records from the Chinese government, and he's 7 feet tall. He would stand out like more than anyone would possibly stand out in China. And so the idea, my gut feeling initially is that this is not fake. But it's fully dismissed. I had never heard of this guy. Until this week. I just happened to hear someone talking about him on one of my history conspiracy podcasts that I was watching. And I have looked into oldest people before. I've looked into, he's almost Yao Ming, and from 300 years ago. So even more standoutish back then, I would assume, than Yao Ming today. But this guy seems to have a pretty compelling case for both his existence as a person. There's photographs of him. He was a real person, clearly. But also his longevity, the fact that he served in the military, and he served long enough to, retire. It was 51 he joined, and it was like 90 or something, 91 that he retired, and then continued living and interacting with people and doing things for another 160 years. Excuse me. But despite the solidness of his story, he's just fully dismissed. He doesn't even appear. If you look into oldest living people, longest living people, you're probably not going to find his name. He's just fully dismissed because he falls too far outside of the mainstream narrative. Just like all of the OOP arts, all of the objects found in rocks, the dozens and dozens and dozens of objects, impossible objects found in rocks, they just fall too far outside of the story, so they just get dismissed. And this is how all of science, it's not just archaeology, but really all of science works. Archaeology is a particularly good example because it's more of a soft science, right? It's maybe chemistry doesn't work this way, right? So maybe not all of science, but certainly the soft sciences. There's just anything that doesn't fit just gets ignored. It just gets dismissed. It doesn't even get recorded as an anomaly. You look up the oldest living people, you won't find this guy's name. Just gets effectively erased. Anything that falls outside of the narrative gets erased. And this is one of the reasons why you have these YouTubers now who are at the forefront of discovery and rediscovery. and are shaping the world of archaeology today is because they're not bound by this, silly rule of follow the narrative or else. And so they're looking into these stories and they're putting pieces together, and they're digging through the archives to find all of these overlooked examples, and more are being found constantly, because this isn't a recent thing. It's been going on at least since the Renaissance, with the birth of science, the birth of modern science, and the attack that the religion of modern science lobbied against actual science. They called themselves the birth of modern science, and they completely destroyed what science actually is. And now you stick to the story, and it doesn't matter what the science says. It doesn't matter what the experiment says. It's only what the science says. So, all right. Yeah, I know. Is that like a lot of cultures use the human body. I forget what measurement, but from fingertip to elbow, that was a common one. Obviously the foot, the hand, knuckles, stuff like that. Yeah. So no, I'm not too familiar with the Russian imperial measurements, but yeah. So unfortunately, it's looking to me like there might not be a guest tonight. I might have flubbed it, fellas. I might have fumbled the ball, and I messed it up. Or I might be getting ahead of myself. He did say he might not be around until 6, and now that I'm thinking about it, that invite that I got from Mark might have been just an auto invite from the calendar event that I set up with him. So we might still just be waiting on Mark. This might be an especially long episode if you guys hang out the whole time. Yeah, for me as well, it is 8 inches. Yep, same with the length of the beginning of my palm to the tip of my middle finger. Both of those are pretty much exactly 8 inches. Wahalu, brother. So yeah, Mark did say, he emailed me. It was either this morning or late last night, saying that he was going to be on. So since I haven't heard anything else, I think I might have been getting ahead of myself. He warned me that he would be running late. I was hoping 5:30, but he did say it could be 6. So I'm going to keep hanging out probably for another 20 minutes at least, maybe another 30 minutes. And not sure what to talk about. So you guys give me a call if you want. Let me go ahead and I'll repost the link on here, but I'm going to try and pull up the video. I'm not going to try and pull up the video because I'd have to log back out. Let's see. Am I still logged out? No, I'm not. Yeah. If you guys want the link to call in, ask me for it in chat and I'll repost it. Because I can't pin comments from OBS and I don't want to go through the hassle of YouTube. So feel free to call in. Feel free to bring up any topic you like. Yeah, I know it's a unexciting conclusion, but I really think the conclusion of the Great Pyramids is that Khufu, it's a tomb for Khufu. The Great Pyramid's a tomb for Khufu. It was built 4,500 years ago. They didn't have high technology, and they were geniuses, though. What they did is not to be, unappreciated, right? The fact that aliens didn't build it, the fact that Atlantis didn't build it, I think makes it even more impressive. The fact that people are forced to go to aliens or super high tech are the only option. I don't know if you should be disappointed if you were to find out that that weren't the truth, because look at what people are capable of with simple means. Like that is truly impressive. That's mind blowing. That's much more impressive in my opinion. So I love it. I think that the mystery of the Great Pyramid is, I feel a little uncomfortable saying it's solved, but we're getting there. I do feel like we are truly getting there. After 4,500 years, I feel like we're truly getting there. Nephilim giant clowns real popular right now. They do seem, maybe it's just my algorithm, but they're clowns in general are kind of popular. You're seeing it a lot in like rap music. I'm seeing more and more people talking about it in the conspiracy circle. Like, this isn't a new idea. This has been floating around for a very long time, but it was an incredibly fringe idea for a very, very long time. Not many people had ever heard about it. I hadn't seen a whole lot of in-depth work done on it. And now there's, entire podcasts dedicated to the topic, and many people are talking about it. Seems to be blown up. I don't know. I don't know how you guys feel about serendipity and nods from the universe and stuff like that. But yeah, I was talking about it. Now everyone's talking about it. Maybe that's just how the algorithm works. I know that is how the algorithm works, but also it does seem to be increased traffic. So, yeah, is that because there's something there? Is that because these internet archaeologists, these internet sleuths are onto something and people are resonating with this idea? And or is it all a psyop? Who knows? I use my male reproductive organ to measure things in real life. That's tricky, I feel like. You'd have a very inconsistent measuring stick. I don't know, maybe yours is more consistent than mine, but unlike a hand that changes sizes. 1 inch at a time. I like it. Call in, fellas. I've run out. I didn't prepare a show. I had like 30 minutes worth of stuff to talk about just to fill in time for Mark to get here, but he's not here yet, and I've gone well over 30 minutes, so I'm fully out. So call in, or I guess just hang out and chat and stare at me, and I'll stare back at you, and we'll wait for Mark. It'll be a good time. I don't know. I'm out, fellas. I do want to look more into this. Maybe I'll look into this Chinese guy a little bit more. So this picture taken, it's an old looking photograph. I don't know the year here, but that's clearly black and white photography, and that's clearly color. So and yeah, he's a giant. He looks even younger there than in this. He looks significantly younger in this photograph. I'd love to get some dates on these photographs. I don't think that's the same person in that one, though. It's also strange how it's not strange. I've talked about it. It's deliberate. It's the erasure of things. But like, you have to to find decent pictures. None of them exist anymore. At least they don't pop up on Google. You can best historical pictures are on Pinterest, which is, it's like, what is going on there? That's an interesting Ice King that looks like the Game of Thrones. I don't know if these are all pictures of him or if these are all different Chinese giants, but you know, there's several photos here of some giants. Yeah, interesting stuff. I need to do more research into this guy for sure. I want to do potentially a full episode on this guy because that is one of the more interesting stories I've heard recently. 256-year-old, 7-foot China man who lived long enough to be both in black and white photography and color photography and all kinds of, witnessed by many people, recorded. And I've never seen a face like that. Have you ever seen a face like that? Like, if a guy ever was 256 years old, that's the guy right there, man. Jesus Christ, look at that. That is the oldest person I've ever seen. That's a hell of a face. That is a hell of a face. You believe the height, just not the age. Mr. Watson, call in and let's talk about it. I mean that. I would love to know why you don't believe it. What is it? It's purely because it's too much, right? It's purely because it's too much. But why? Why don't you believe it? And those black and white photographs, I don't know when color photography was widely introduced. That black and white photograph of him looks like a rather old black and white photograph to me, but that really doesn't mean anything. You can use an old camera today and take a picture like that, potentially. So yeah, my argument that I was about to make probably wouldn't hold up. I still want you to call in. Still call in and let's talk about it. Probably because he's 256 years old would be why his nose looks a little weird. But yeah, the idea of ancient aliens creating the white race and the Asian race, not the craziest thing to me. That was brought up a while back in the show. And there are definitely some pretty large missing links in the evolutionary chain. And yeah, you combine it with the myths and the religions and everything else, and it's like I really can't dismiss ancient aliens, and I really instinctually want to, but we're very distinct people, and yeah, how did we go from? I've also heard recently the idea, and I kind of liked this idea, the idea that we did not evolve from apes, but apes actually devolved from humans. So, 300 million years ago or whenever, could be far more recent than that, but the aliens came down and created humans or left humans on this planet. And then over the millennia, apes actually devolved from humans. That was, honest to God, it had never occurred to me. So it was just like, well, that's a really simple idea. It's like, that's the most basic idea. If we came from apes, why couldn't apes come from us? And it had genuinely never occurred to me. So, I don't know. I thought I'd share that because it was interesting to me. But yeah, the idea of aliens creating the races, creating humans, and if they did do that, and we have been around for 300 million years or whatever, the idea that apes could have evolved from us or devolved from us isn't entirely outlandish to me. No more outlandish than us evolving from apes, really. And, oh, goodness, my brain is a mess. I just had another topic I wanted to bring up, and it flew out of my head before I could bring it up. I do that a lot. So, that wouldn't understand me at all. I don't think I've really heard that before, though. Did he have particularly tall parents? I don't, because he had a pituitary issue, I thought. Right, I just remembered what I wanted to talk about, so I'm going to go for it before I forget again. Interbreeding of different species. Again, serendipity, I saw like multiple different things on this, all in a very short time period recently. Was believed, I guess, that, interspecies breeding can't occur, or on the off times that it can occur, you end up with infertile offspring, like a mule. But more recently, we have had some very interesting cases of interspecies breeding. There's been a hybrid dog-fox that was found, which I think a lot of children probably look at dogs and foxes and think, oh, they can have babies, right? They look similar enough. But science goes, oh, no, it's impossible. The chromosomes, it's not possible. But yeah, there are hybrid fox dogs out there. There's at least one that's in captivity now. There are ligers, and the opposite of ligers, something just beeped at me, but I don't know what. Hopefully I'm not missing an invite from Mark or something. Let me just check my email here again, see if he's potentially responded. But yeah, there's ligers and what's the tigans? I don't know what the other one's called off right now. Should be able to start in 20 minutes. That was 2 minutes ago. So this is going to be a long show. I'll probably need to restart Zoom again and send him another third new link. But we'll get to that when we get to it. So yeah, but these ligers are now having, and ligers were thought to be kind of like mules, these infertile creatures. Yes, you could breed one generation of a cross between tigers and lions, and when you mix tigers and lions, you don't get what you would expect. It depends on who's the who's the mother and who's the father. But one way, if you have like a male tiger and a female lion, you get these really giant creatures, or vice versa. I don't remember which way it goes, right? You get a female tiger and a male lion. You get these like dwarf little ligers, right? I know liger is the big one. Tigan, I think, is what they call the other one. That's the little one. They have short little, like they have dwarfism. And not every single one, it's not guaranteed. You can pop out a normal Tigan, but it's something like 80% rate for dwarfism. Like they get these little stubby legs. They're funny looking little animals. So you're not just getting this normal cross between them. You're getting two like completely new animal breeds, essentially. And this new animal breed can breed. It can have offspring. And then there were even more examples and it's escaping me. It's not on the tip of my tongue at all. It's totally out of my head. But there were some other animals of totally different species with totally different numbers of chromosomes that were interbreeding and essentially creating these new species. And I know that a few decades ago, or a decade and a half ago, something like that, they were combining mice and elephant embryos. So they had successfully fertilized an elephant embryo with mouse sperm. Those are totally different species, right? Like not even close to each other. And of course you have Alex Jones, who will tell you all about the spider pigs, the spider goats, and all kinds of other things. And so when you go back into stuff that supposedly is impossible according to the science, right? But when you go back into ancient history, you see a lot of these hybrid creatures, these winged horses, just hybrid creatures all over. They're all over the world. They're all over myth. They're all over. And they're again something that is just dismissed as nonsense. Just like the 256-year-old man who I'm still looking at you to call in, buddy. I will argue with you because I'm a believer. I haven't done the research yet, but I'm a believer. So call in and back up your doubt. Which let me go ahead and repost one more time the link in case anyone does want to call in. Did I actually post the link? What did I just do? I don't see. There we go. Okay, it's there. Just a little lag. But yeah, these ridiculous stories of hybrid creatures seeming a lot less ridiculous. It's impossible according to the science, yet we've fertilized elephant embryos with sperms of mice. And when I read about that, 15 years ago or whenever they first did it, it really seemed to me that the procedure essentially was taking an elephant embryo and injecting it with the sperm of a mouse. Wasn't exactly this super duper high tech sci-fi magical mystical stuff. It was taking the embryo of an elephant and injecting it with the sperm of a mouse, and then it started duplicating and creating life the way that life is created when you inject embryos with sperm. So, I don't know. These stories of all these hybrid animals, these statues of all of these hybrid animals, and the story of evolution, right? If you take a lion and a tiger, these are two very similar animals physically, in physical appearance and structure and size and everything and function and form, right? They're two very similar animals, and you breed them, you get either this monster giant cat that's, twice the size of either of its parents, still similar in form, or you get this other mini cat, which has a totally different body structure, is half the size of the parents or a quarter of the size of the parents or something. And that's from two animals that are almost identical interbreeding. So what happens if you interbreed a horse and a bird, right? Okay, maybe that's too fanciful for you. What happens when you interbreed an elephant and a mouse? You get these entirely new species, at least potentially, right? With who knows what kind of features. And I think there's some issues with evolution, and there's obviously issues with the science. And this idea of hybrids is seemingly more than just an idea, and a heck of a lot more possible than we've been led to believe. and could be, a viable alternative for evolution and why we see all of these, why we see what we see in the creatures of the world. Apes are pretty degen. Yeah, there's the Great Ape War. It's pretty interesting. Videos of monkeys watching people use tools and then, monkey see, monkey do. Those are pretty interesting. Videos of crows using tools is extremely interesting. I very strongly believe that animals and humans are far less separated from each other than most people like to think. And man, there's some very, very smart birds out there. Crows are impressive creatures. Yeah, Mr. Slav. That's how tapers were made. Yeah. Yeah, the Down syndrome albino liger, I have seen it, and I might pull up an image of it because it is a goof. It is such a goof. I don't know if this is it. It was it a liger? Was it a tigan? And was it albino? Was it specifically albino, Down syndrome, albino liger? Let's see if this pulls it up. Might have just been a tiger. It's still, I mean, look at that face. That is a goof right there. That is a goof. That's not even, I guess that's just a regular, well, not a regular tiger, right? But that's not even a liger. So doesn't actually fit into this conversation. But that's still pretty damn funny to look at. Look at that goof right there. So, would anyone like to call in? Anyone have anything to share? Otherwise, I guess we're just chilling. I'm gonna relaunch this meeting, resend an invite to Mark, and hopefully he'll be able to join us in the next 10 minutes or so. I have no idea how long he intends on hanging out for. Usually the episode's over by now. So I might, I think I will. Danny Polishchuk, Mr. Danny, Mr. Low Value Male, was trying his little experiment with pulling down the live streams and re-uploading videos. I'm going to leave this live stream up, but I am going to re-upload just the Mark portion tomorrow or the next day or something like that. And I double check real quick that I am in fact recording this, but I believe I am. Yep, the red light's on. I'm recording. So yeah, so tomorrow, next day, something like that, I'll re-upload just the Mark portion. See if that gets me any play in the algorithm. See how that goes. Chadwick is still alive. I'm out of history content, out of conspiracy content, but Chadwick is still alive. He is a tough chicken. He did not get appropriate medical care. I don't know how to give stitches, nor do I have the materials to give stitches and the supplies. He definitely needed stitches, but I was pretty convinced that with my lack of ability and supplies, I would have made the situation worse if I tried to. So I didn't try to give him stitches. I did try to bandage him up a little bit, but the wounds are pretty big, and there's one in between his wings and one across his side. And so I couldn't figure out a good way to wrap him without like binding up his legs and impeding his walking. And when he had bandages on, him and the other chickens would peck at him. So I gave up on the bandages. So he's been surviving with nothing but Neosporin. I put some Neosporin on his wounds, and he's surviving. He started taking dust baths again, so his wounds are just packed with dirt. His wounds are just black, and not from scabs, from just dirt. But I've seen no signs of infection yet. The wound on his back is healing up. It's, I think, going to heal up nicely on its own. The wound on his side is definitely worse. Definitely needed stitches. I don't know. I don't know. We'll see. Time will tell. But he's still alive for now. So that's very exciting because I thought I was going to have to kill Chadwick. So let me relaunch this meeting, send a new invite to Mark, and hopefully he's able to join us in the next couple of minutes and we can get this show on the road. All right. Copy invite link. Here is the new invite link, which I guess, what are the legal ramifications for pseudo-humanoid interspecies crossbreeds? It's illegal, as far as I know, in like pretty much every single country of the world. And I think it might be banned by, some type of convention like the Geneva Convention. But there were reports, at least, rumors at least, of Russia doing some experiments with chimpanzees and human women. And they successfully impregnated human women with male chimpanzees. There are other accounts. There's some accounts from Africa of potential, cases of this, but are they actually, human monkey hybrids, or is it just some guy with some type of disorder? Not sure. And the Russian examples, it's one of those stories of it's just stories, because this was all very top secret kind of work, right? And when I click on my page not logged in, I can see my videos. When I click on my page logged in, the videos are not there. So yeah, it's one of those stories where there's like really no evidence. It's just stories, and they go, oh yeah, there can't be evidence. And now I have to copy this, log back in. Let's see if this auto logs me back in like it did last time. No, it doesn't. All right. But yeah, it's definitely possible. The interbreeding is possible. Women and men can make babies with the great apes. That's a fact. So the idea that no one's ever experimented with this before seems highly unlikely to me. I can just about guarantee that people have experimented with that before. I can just about guarantee that there are some ape-human hybrids. If they're alive right now, I couldn't tell you, but what am I doing? Trying to multitask and not doing so successfully. All right. Copy invite link. Not sure why that just reloaded, but pin that link. All right. I don't know how long Mark's going to hang out, and whenever Mark's gone, the episode's over, so potentially that will be the last the last link. So it's pinned there. Alrighty. So we're just chilling. Chadwick, still alive, kicking it, going strong, still laying eggs, still hanging out with the other chickens. He's a tough fella. So we were talking about how it was at least brought up that we're different subspecies, right, as humans. I mean, I think you could very reasonably make the argument with the way classifications are made in science. I'm not saying it's the correct argument, but you could at least reasonably make it that, I don't know about you guys, there's few types of people on Earth who are uglier than British people, right? White people are not all the same. Black people are not all the same. Asian people are not all the same. I think you could very easily make the argument that there are many different subspecies of white people, many different subspecies of black people, many different subspecies of Asian people, and that those three groups are their own distinct species, obviously related, obviously in the same genus, but distinct enough groups that they could be classified as their own species, not just subspecies. Then you have another group of people that I've mentioned a few times, which I think fall even further outside of those three groups, even further separated, that are still currently alive. So we used to have Neanderthals, right? Would you think that Neanderthals deserve legal rights and human rights? They're not a modern human. I personally would argue that they do. You know, what if we find Bigfoot? Does he deserve human rights? Yeah, I would say probably. So these hybrids, would they deserve human rights? I would probably be for it. I think, again, I said it earlier, humans and animals are far less separated than we like to think. Not to get too gay on you guys, but like, animals should have a lot more rights too. They should be treated much better. We should be considering the fact that they are living beings with emotions and thoughts and dreams, and pretty much everything that we've got going on, they've got going on too. I say that I'm basically a carnivore. You know, I like to eat meat. I do recognize we are different. I do recognize there's a separation. I don't think that everyone should become vegan because animals are more similar than we like to think they are. But at that same time, I do believe that. I do believe that animals are a lot more similar than I think we give them credit for. I think they're a lot more intelligent, a lot more emotional. You know, I think they essentially have all of the same qualities we do, mentally, spiritually. They just don't have a language that we understand. They don't have thumbs. They don't have, civilizations, but like, they have dreams. They have emotions. They have thoughts. So I don't know, but in a somewhat related topic, since Down syndrome was mentioned earlier, I think, be totally okay with having a Down syndrome kid. You know, it's like, what's the complaint of most parents? And this is changing. What's the complaint of parents today? Probably that they can't go make OnlyFans content because they have to feed their son, or they can't stare at their phone and play Candy Crush because they have to feed their son or something like that. So I feel like the attitude is shifting a bit. But the complaint of parents from, say, 50 years ago, I feel like it was always, they grow up so fast. We don't get enough time with them as children. And that's what you get with a Downy. It's just like a permanent child. It's a permanent, happy, loving child. I have never met an unhappy Downy. They're always just like bundles of joy. They're always so happy. They're such sweet, like innocent souls from my experience. So the idea of having a Downy kid, I'd let my daughter date a Downy. Wasn't the question. It's what I answered. Yeah. Okay. That's a great point, Mr. Slav. Animal rights advocacy is different than criminalizing intentional cruelty towards animals. I wouldn't consider myself an animal rights advocate or I don't really fight for that. But I do believe that they do deserve to be treated far better than they typically are, and I do believe that most people's view on them is that they're a lot of people view them almost as inanimate objects. I remember growing up, the science was very settled, that dogs don't have emotions. They don't love you. They don't think. They're just these automatons driven purely by instinct. They only wag their tail when they see you because, they know that you'll give them food. And it's like they don't get sad when their puppy dies. That's just an act they're putting on because they know you'll give them attention. And it's like, first of all, what you're describing is like manipulation. If they're capable of that, they're probably capable of other fucking thoughts and stuff. It's like, but yeah, no, I think that's completely ridiculous. I think that animals are far more similar, and we should treat them better. But yeah, I definitely don't like cruelty to animals. But I'm not a PETA person for sure, I guess is a good way to put it. Fuck PETA. All right, hopefully soon. Let's see. It's been 20 minutes, so hopefully I'm getting a call any minute now. I'm hoping. I'm really hoping. My nose is a little congested. Sorry for the sniffles. I'm bringing the low-value male vibes to the show with my sniffling. So yeah, I'll give it another 10, I think. I do believe he is all of his messages suggest he's intending to come on, and I very much want him to come on. But if he's not here by like 6:40, I think I'm gonna have to dip and end the show and try and reschedule because I've been here for an hour and 40 minutes already, so. You guys have just been chilling with me. Well, no one wants to call in. This would have been a great opportunity to have a conversation. You still can call in. You guys are just chilling with the goop. So hopefully we're chilling with Mark soon. I still don't know what Cumtown is. I know it's a podcast. And I know it was very popular. I know people talked about it a lot. But I've never seen it. This is the best show. I hope you haven't been sitting there the whole time, Mr. Wagers. You've got better things to do with your Sunday night than this. This is not that any of my episodes. I take that back. I'm actually very proud of my breakdown of the Ramses statue. That was like my 3rd episode ever or something. I'm quite proud of that one, where I'm challenging the ideas of Uncharted X, especially since that was at a time where I still believed all of the phony baloney that Uncharted X was peddling. I just thought he had gotten a few details wrong, and I was like, hey, look, you've missed some stuff. And then the thread unraveled from there. But my breakdown of the Ramses statue, essentially proving, I'm quite convinced that I did prove, and not that I'd be the first person to prove it. Archaeologists have been making the same claim for a very long time. I just went through the process myself to prove that these statues, these granite statues of Ramses II, were in fact made by Ramses II. He is not I have no idea what just fell. He is not the greatest. Oh, my phone charger. He's not the greatest thief in Egyptian history. He is one of the greatest creators in Egyptian history. He really was creating all of those magnificent statues. And if he was creating the statues, probably the buildings as well that are attributed to him, he created. I thought that video was actually really good. I was quite pleased with that one. The rest of these are all pretty low quality, but even with the low quality of these videos, this one's up there, since it's just me chilling with no planned material, just waiting for someone else. And you've been here for it all. All right. 6:31. 31 minutes ago, he said in 20 minutes. We've come so far. I think we're so close. But, this went from 5 to 5:30 to 6 to 6:30. I just can't wait much longer. I just can't do it. So, I'm giving him a few more minutes, and I hope he does come on. I would really like to talk to him, but we're just gonna have to reschedule if he's not here in like the next couple minutes. I don't even know if I'm gonna wait till 6:40. So, yeah, I don't know. The two takeaways from this episode: the Great Pyramid really was Khufu's tomb. It is a boring video. I'm not gonna lie. The History for Granite video, his most recent video, it's a 2-parter. But his most recent video confirming that Khufu's tomb is in fact Khufu's tomb. It's a boring video. It wasn't exciting. I was excited. I am really burpy today. I was excited because it seems to actually be so. Oh, Mark is here. Mark is here. I wonder how long he's been waiting. I think he just called in though. So, there is Mark. Awesome. Let's see if I can set this up for a, there we go.
Yo.
How's it going?
Good, brother. I'm not sure if you were sending me the link multiple times because you have like a limited time on the meeting. I could start a meeting. I have the pro Zoom, so
Yeah.
have like.
When this one runs out, if you want to start the next one, that would be, yeah, because I am using the free version. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah, no worries. Here, let me just. Yeah, I mean, I'd rather just start a meeting right now. That way we don't have any interruptions. So why don't I just send you the link? Check your email right now. I'll send it to you right away, and we'll just that way we don't have a time limit. Because
Okay.
I already feel bad for being late. I apologize. I had a wild day, but yeah, let's get into a meeting that doesn't have a time limit.
If you're okay with it, this is typically a live call-in show, so people can call in. If you don't mind, I'll post the link you send me into the YouTube chat.
Yeah.
So that people can call in if they would like to, and then you'll have to answer since you're hosting. But
Right on.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you for making it. I'm glad you took the busy day. I'm glad you still showed up. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I should have known when we scheduled it. It was my grandmother's 95th birthday, so we had like a party, and now I live like an hour away from where my family is, so it's like going back and forth is a lot more than I expected. So here I am. Sorry I'm late. You have me for as long as you need me, and when we start this other meeting, I can make you the host, so you could still do all the call-in stuff.
Okay.
And it won't be like limited still. It'll still be under my account.
Gotcha.
All right, brother.
Very cool.
I'll see you in a moment.
All right. So we got him just in the nick of time. I was about to dip, but yeah, hopefully. And like I said, if you're here hearing this, then you're already here hearing this. But I will repost just the Mark portion tomorrow, or the next day. I don't know if I'll actually get to it tomorrow, but I will re-upload that. So some hidden history of America, I believe, is what's coming, unless Mark wants to talk about something else. But I really want to see how far back he goes in America. It seemed like he had some opinions on Quetzalcoatl during Danny's show, but maybe he goes back even further. I'm interested to find out. There it is. Just refresh, but there it is. I might need a bathroom break before we finish this interview. I've been sitting here a while. Okay. Oh, you know what? No, I don't. Shit. I'm not sure how to make this work. You know what? Maybe you guys just won't see me. No, I don't know. Huh. I'm trying to think about how to make this work without echo and I can't join with my computer audio because then there will be an echo from Mark. But if I don't join with my computer audio, Mark will not be able to hear me. So I think I have to double join Mark's meeting. I think I have to call in. Oh boy, oh boy. He can't hear me right now. Oh, hopefully I didn't just give out Mark's phone number on the stream. I just noticed it's Oh, I'm the host. I can admit myself. All right. Cool. All right. I think we're good. Mark should be able to hear me now.
Yep.
Great. All right. I think we're good. I think we're set up. Cool. So yeah, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to talk about. I'm interested in the hidden history of America, and I focus mostly on antiquities on my channel. As far back as I can go is what I like to talk about. I think your hidden history of America might be a little more recent, but you also seem to have some thoughts on Quetzalcoatl. I don't know if you go even further back. I'd love to start as far back as you're comfortable with America and just like kind of run through the timeline. I'm not sure why my camera's not on, but there we go, start video. But yeah, if that works for you, let's go to the beginning of America and work our way up.
Sure. Are we taking callers during that, or how's that work? And we met through Danny's show, right? Didn't you call into Danny Politics show? And that's probably how you first saw me, right?
That is, in fact, how I first saw you. Yeah, and he's the reason I do this show. He let me be a guest on his show one night, the same as you, and I went, that was really fun. I want to do that every week.
I love that, man. That's kind of similar to my story with podcasting. Like 4 years ago, I was on Sam Tripoli's Patreon a couple times, and I had already done my own show with my buddies in a room without a camera. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to fucking do this over Zoom and talk to all these people who I can't talk to in person. So cool. I dig that.
Yeah. I'm just posting the Zoom link. Excuse me as I... There we go. All right. Zoom links in. Yeah. So you asked if there are callers. And I've only got, I think, about 10 people or less watching right now. So will there be callers? Quite possibly not, but the option is available to them. I just posted the link to the meeting. So we could have a caller, or we might not. We'll see.
Right on. Cool.
Yeah. So.
Well, all right. I'm ready to start whenever you are, and I'm down to talk ancient America. That's a great topic.
Yeah. So I know the Mayans and the Aztecs, all of them are quite cool, and their myths go back quite a bit before America. I mean, they talk about total global resets and ages, multiple ages, which is really all just speculation. So where do you see history actually starting, I guess, for America, where do you feel comfortable sharing thoughts and opinions? Like, I'm quite interested in Quetzalcoatl, so if that's a good starting point for you, we can start with Quetzalcoatl.
Well, I'll give you this. I'm not an expert in the Aztec and Mayan culture, so I'm kind of looking for one of my recent interviews right now, because I did a book interview with a guy, and I can reference some information from there. But my ancient American research goes into a whole from top to bottom, and I mainly focus on New England. So I could give you the ancient history as far as I know it, and I can also share some stories before 1492 of European exploration and quote unquote old world peoples coming to the quote unquote New World, right? And I think the whole idea that North America and South America is called the New World is like a implicit kind of like disinformation. Like they're already squaring you at square one. You're already understanding it from the wrong point of view. That this place is somehow newer than the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Because I believe that this is where Atlantis was. So that's how far back you go.
So. Okay, so the continent of America was Atlantis. No, and would you place Atlantis like pre-Younger Dryas? Would you place it even further back?
Well, I want to find a few references so I could give you the exact dates and not just guess. because I do have a few references that'll tell us like the timetable as it's been studied. I mean, some people don't take this as evidence because they don't believe in Atlantis, right? But you know, it's still there, whether you want to call it Atlantis or not. There's evidence of a civilization, going back that far. Not in North America as we know it today, because the continents looked different back then. So if you say, was it in North America? Yeah, parts of it, what was available to them. But a large part of North America was underwater, what is now desert. The whole idea that California was an island.
Yeah, multiple old maps that show it as an island.
Well, and it's not just the maps. Like, there's geological evidence that proves that there was once a sea in a place where there's now it's a desert. So,
okay.
I mean, it's just it goes beyond speculation at that point when you have concrete evidence. But if we're not recording yet, let's talk all this during the show.
No, we're live.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry, we're live. From
Right.
From the get-go we've been live. My bad.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I probably asked that like 4 times like an idiot. My bad. So yeah, anyways, the timetable I think goes back really far. And if you give me a moment, I can find some of my prepared slides on this topic. I've done shows before, specifically on this topic of Atlantis. But one of the reasons why I started looking into all this is because obviously I had a podcast and whatnot. I've been researching this stuff for years before I had the podcast. And one of the things that always sort of rubbed me the wrong way when it came to the world of conspiracy theories that we're in here on the internet is there's a whole segment of people that are starting to question history. That doesn't bother me at all. But one of the conclusions that they've drawn from questioning history, something that I also do, is that here 500 years ago there was some kind of mud flood, and all of these stone buildings that comprise, these Capitol buildings for the most part, these major stone structures that are cathedrals or state buildings, things like that, federal buildings. These were all here before the Europeans got here.
So you're anti-mud flood?
Well, it's not a matter of anti or not. I think, again, if there's evidence for it, you can show me that it's there. Awesome. I'm all for that. I've seen the basement windows. I think they're basement windows. I don't think that that's necessarily proof of the structure being submerged into the ground. But then again, I have seen on a small scale experiments that show that exact thing happening. You can make a diorama with the right situation, a little model house. And
there's some interesting wood etchings from like the 1400s of Roman runes that don't exist anymore, but or some of them do. Like the Triumphant Arch, I think is one example, but there's other runes as well that don't exist anymore, and they're all like half submerged. They're submerged up like over 12 to 18 feet, in mud. I've also seen, I think the most
America.
No, not in America. These are over in Rome. But in America,
I'm not saying that mud floods don't happen. They happen. Like, it's a thing.
I'm also not a believer of the mud flood, so I'm right there with you. I'm just presenting some of the more compelling evidence that I've seen, and I think the most compelling piece of evidence, because you have like Seattle and large cities that have these underground structures and underground cities, but I've seen some photos from some relatively small towns out in Western America, where they were like gold mining towns, and the structures that are built there were supposedly built because of the gold mine, and nothing was supposed to be there before that, and yet if you dig down, they're on top of an already older town. So there are some compelling things. It's not enough to make me believe in the mud flood as it's presented, but I am generally a believer that catastrophe is much more around the corner than we like to think it is. I think the Earth is a much more volatile place than people like to think it is. So I think that things can change rather quickly. We were just talking about California being an island, and I don't know when you think that was, but I think stuff like that happens, much more frequently than we think. These large changes to land masses and stuff like that, I think is much more possible than people like to think.
Yeah. Well, and again, like, I'm not someone who's so skeptical that I've been proven conclusive on any of this stuff. What raised alarm bells in me was how conclusive it seemed some of this information was being presented. This is how it is. All of this has been written out of history. These very declarative, definitive statements. And I got excited by that because I'm living in a place that has, according to what we've been told, 400 years of civilized with quotes, history, right? This is when the Europeans came here, in 1492, but then they really started coming in the 1600s, right? Between 1492 and 1620, there were just explorers and conquistadors. That's what we're told, right? So I got really curious about that again, because there seems to be gray areas within academia. There seems to be gray areas within this world of conspiracy. And here I am living in a place where I have the vehicle to travel and the freedom, the time to do it, the money to afford it, the interest. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go out. I'm going to look at what these people are talking about. So I start looking at places like Yale University's campus, where there are tons of interesting buildings that you can look at. And then I start looking at secret societies, and I notice and this is something I've been looking at for a while, but I kind of, with a new lens, looked at it when this architecture, old world building conversation came into the picture. So I look at the campus with new eyes. I start looking around, and I see this like classic image. It's actually on the Wikipedia page when you type in secret societies, and it comes from like Time magazine or one of those, like Harper's Weekly, one of those like really classic American publications. I think it's Harper's because it's from the 19th century. And it's this drawing of the secret societies at Yale and their buildings. And within the design, in the marginalia in the corners, there's what looks like a beehive. And at first I'm like, okay, that's a beehive. That makes sense. In Freemasonry, they have the beehive symbol. But then I thought about how around New England there are these stone chambers made out of stone, and they look just like that. So I'm thinking, maybe, just maybe, Yale University, being as old as it is, has done some kind of research on all these stone structures, or maybe has an idea of who these people were that built these stone structures. Because for the most part, a lot of them are explained away as the result of glacier activity way back when, before the Native Americans were here. And then some of them are described as colonial constructions. So the result of farming, they would plow a field, pile up the stones, and do fun projects with it, like make a root cellar. So those are the explanations. It's either a glacier randomly piled the stones that way, or a farmer piled the stones that way. There's really nobody.
The Native Americans were never doing it. I'm with you.
To me, I'm kind of thinking like, well, that's insulting. Because you look at the Native American legend, they have stories about stones and doing stuff with stones and stone structures, but they say that the giants built a lot of them. They don't say they built them. They say the giants built the big ones, the ones that defy, what you'd think humans could build with, an ox and a plow. Like, this is the kind of physics, that goes into this stuff, right? That you have to have some sort of, force that's capable of pulling this object with a pulley, or right,
and lifting in
those terms. Yeah. And the Native Americans, they don't even go into that. They're like, no, the giants built it, right?
Right.
And they have their own stone constructions that they use for farming, which again, there's probably a racial aspect or a colonial aspect to why that stuff was not talked about. They wanted to make the Native Americans seem primitive. They wanted them to be, converted to Christianity. So anything that was a part of their culture was erased, forgotten, misrepresented, denigrated. So that, again, a huge gray area with all these stone structures. So I started looking, and turns out they're astronomically aligned, many of them, especially the stone chambers, because you create these like pinholes where the light will come through in a very specific way on a specific date. So you have these chambers that are aligned to the equinox, the solstice. These are alignments that we see with the major megaliths of the world.
Right.
And they're happening with these rudimentary looking stone structures. Now, is it that they're rudimentary looking because primitive people made them? Or is it they're rudimentary looking because they've been weathered over thousands of years? Because we're told as a civilization, humanity, we were cavemen. Then we figured it all out in Egypt. And then it all spread from there, right?
Nothing until 6,000 years ago, yeah.
We just figured it out, and it's been great ever since, and we've only been getting better ever since, right? This is, again, the big lie that we've all been told. So I start thinking, well, maybe the story about the Native Americans has some things that need to be looked into. Maybe there's stories about the New World that don't fit into the quote-unquote story we've been given. And sure enough, there's tons of examples, right down to the Prince of Wales coming over to America in the 1300s, when Europe was in the Dark Ages, and he was looking for gold here in the Americas. And this is Prince Madoc is his name. You could look it up. I've interviewed an author who's written a book about this this journey that he went on. And sure enough, when the U.S. government was working out the Louisiana Purchase and whatnot, and writing up treaties with different tribes and doing that whole political, thievery of the land, they were looking for this Welsh tribe because they didn't want any, there were rumors that these Welsh people came over to America and not all of them came back, right? So there's this the Welsh
land
tribe.
disputes, right? Okay.
So they have to manage these land disputes. So you can't have a European nation in those negotiations, because then that gives that tribe so much more power than you want them to have. So those tribes that had connections to the old world, quote unquote old world, were all basically marginalized, killed, fought. They either targeted them or to kill them, or to write them out of history. And that's what a big, you can argue that with many of the Native American tribes, because what did they do to them? They replaced them. They take them off their land. They take them away from their culture, away from their connection, away from their oral traditions. And now we have a group of people that are basically putty in the government's hands. I mean, you look at what's happening in Canada, and the Native Americans are like fighting, for their own enslavement in many ways. And I don't mean to insult any natives that are listening, or any First Nations people that are listening, but look at a lot of their
Canada's
politics.
A mess.
They've become super woke for all the wrong reasons, and they're not even addressing the actual, problems that put them in that situation that, not their fault. I'm not saying that it's their fault, but it's colonization that needs to be addressed, right? So
that's very interesting. Because I've talked about the Welsh in America many times on this channel, and there's seems like they definitely were here. I agree with you on that one. I'd never actually heard the reason for their elimination and their cover-up. And that's such an obvious reason. That makes so much sense. Yes, if the Welsh were here, they would have a claim to the land, and that's obviously a problem. You would do everything in your power to eliminate them and erase their presence. So that makes so much sense. Thank you. Yeah.
Oh, no problem. And it makes more sense when you start to realize that that's what Columbus's whole job was, because And Joseph Farrell talks about this in several of his books. If people aren't familiar with Joseph P. Farrell, he's written like 40 books. He is the conspiracy author alive today. Like he's the man. I appreciate his work. Maybe people smarter than me would find a reason to disagree with him, but when it comes to Columbus, what you have to understand is the whole basically trading companies situation. And the world we live in today is the result of these trading companies, right? That's where the corporation was born, in the Dutch East India Trading Company, the British East India Trading Company, and the ones that came before and after them, whose names are less memorable, probably for a reason, right? And in Venice and Florence, you have these competing interests, right? And I believe, I'm really good with geography. I'm not great with Italian city geography, so I don't know where Venice and Florence are in relation to one another, but one of them had the advantage over the other as it pertained to leaving the Mediterranean, right? One of them would have to go all the way around the boot, whereas the other one just goes straight out. So there's an advantage for Venice, which I think was further away from the Straits of Gibraltar, to keep this information they're learning about the New World secret. Because if they told any of their competitors who were all closer to the Straits of Gibraltar, they're screwed. So what's going on here? In that time period, before we have the official age of discovery, you have all the Moors, right? The Moors get talked about a lot in the old world conversation. Well, these guys, they weren't afraid of the ocean like everyone thinks, like the Greeks made us think. Like, no. They went all the way across. They went around, wherever, however you believe the earth is shaped. They traveled every corner or curve of it before anyone else. And there are stories of these African traders who would go around the world trading gold, and they would do it using sign language. They didn't have to communicate using verbal language. They would use sign language, and that's how they were able to be like multicultural, international before anyone else. They developed this language of symbols and signs, and that's where the gold trading, which it would make sense that Africa would have a monopoly on gold, considering their history, considering they were the first group of people in known history to use metallurgy, and that's an anomaly. People in anthropology, when you're talking about ancient Africa and the development of man from hominids and all these different groups, whether it's like Australopithecus and the Pekin man, there's all these different hominid names that they're too scientific for me to remember. Well, metallurgy just comes out of nowhere, just on the human, what we are told.
From the gods.
Right. And that's what I'm saying. Like to these anthropologists who have their head in the sand and can't integrate these spiritual mysteries, these world mythologies into what they're learning. They try to make sense of it in that materialist way.
Right.
But read between the lines, and very clearly you have some kind of divine intervention going on there.
That was last week's topic, was that, yeah, it's undeniable when you look at the sheer fact that the Great Flood, if you're accrediting that to like the Younger Dryas event, is 12,000 years ago. All of these religions start before the Great Flood, right? So we're talking about stories that have lasted for over 10,000 years. I don't see that happening without them actually being based on something real and very, very important and significant. The existence of the gods in the past, to me, seems pretty undeniable.
Well,
just what were the gods is really the question, I guess.
Yeah, and I think what we have is groups of people who have written history, who are in power, who have allegiances secretly with these groups, or they're just the, proxy for this force, like they're not
these occult groups that are keeping that knowledge alive. That's what you're talking about?
Well, and I would say, when it comes to the occult, like, sure, occult groups, sure, but what does that really mean? Like, because to me, like, who's in power is obvious. It's the royals, it's the government, like, that's obvious.
Okay.
Talking about American government, yeah, there's layers to that. But if we're looking at the old world, like they weren't hiding this kind of stuff the way we hide it today in our modern context, where you have these shadow groups influencing things. Yeah, to a degree, but I think back then they really took for granted the level of education of the average person, because written things were for educated people at a certain point in time, right?
Right.
There was no secrets to keep from people, because that was where the secrets were kept. It was in the language. The people you didn't want to know that stuff couldn't read.
Just didn't have access to it, yeah.
They didn't have access to it. It's not like today where everybody has access to seemingly everything, and there are things that are kept behind closed doors or behind certain filters or behind certain levels of cognitive dissonance too, because certain things are out in the open, and you know, most people recognize it, but what can we do, right? Things are corrupt, or the system's against me. I got a job, I got to work, you know, I don't have time to fight the man.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of paradigm that we're in now didn't exist in ancient times, where people were literally slaves to the king. You know, I think that's something that maybe makes this ancient history study a little more interesting. Obviously, we have the academics the past 200 years who have filtered a lot of that good information out of it. But if you have the skills to read between the lines, I think a lot of that information is there. So when you say occult groups, I'm like, well, they didn't have a reason to be hidden in the past. So that this whole dynamic of like occult or public versus private or exoteric versus esoteric, like this is a phenomena that's developed with our culture. It's a byproduct of the political control paradigm that we live under. Theoretically, in ancient times, there was no political control paradigm that wanted people to not know the truth about who they were and what they're doing here, right? This is the ancient mysteries. This is that knowledge that they give to the initiate, because they don't want everybody knowing this stuff, right? So now in this world where it's and it works on all layers. So you go, Mark, how did we get here from Columbus? Well, let's get back to that, because like that world of, you know, dog eat dog, kill or be killed, like this is a byproduct of that political hierarchy that started in Egypt, Mesopotamia, Sumeria. That's not the beginning of civilization. That's the beginning of enslavement civilization, right?
All right. Yeah.
Old world. Right? So when we're looking at America, we're seeing evidence of this old world, this world that wasn't affected by the empire's meddling. So that's why they took great care to approach the New World in a certain way. They didn't just come here by accident like Columbus, the whole myth suggests about, oh, he was looking for India and he found the Caribbean. No, that's crazy. He targeted the Arawaks. They're not in existence anymore.
Yeah.
For a specific reason, because they came from Ethiopia. They had dreadlocks. What's in Ethiopia? What's the whole rumor about the Ark of the Covenant? And Lalibela, is it right, in Ethiopia, where they have these churches carved into the stone itself.
Yeah.
It's like this is the connection, because those people in the Indian Ocean who were sailing around while people in Rome were fighting each other on chariots, they weren't limited to the Indian Ocean. There wasn't like a guardian of the oceans like stopping them from going to the other oceans, you know. These people were traveling all around the world in ancient times. So when they came to the New World, they said, okay, those people are way too, you know, it's way too obvious that those people are from Ethiopia. And maybe it's not just that. Maybe they were targeted because they're enemies of this group, right? There's a spiritual war at play throughout human history that it makes more sense when you look at historical events. And over the past 200 years, it's taken on a whole nother level. And in the last 100 years, you have communism and all these other political forces that were born out of Europe. Like, you know, the great crimes of communism, like those came from ideas in universities. You know, like, sure, tyrants would be tyrants under any ideology that allowed them to be tyrants, but there's a certain argument to be made that the world that we live in right now
It's
has
very
been
manufactured.
Yeah, it's been manufactured in a way, and I think
Yeah.
that's what, when you really peel apart the discovery of the new world, you realize that that's what's going on, and it's not just the indigenous peoples of the Americas; it's the indigenous peoples of the entire world. That's what colonialism is all about. It's about getting everybody under one collective consciousness MK Ultra program, and why would they want to do that if their only goal was to just make all the money? It's not about making all the money. It's about controlling the story of humanity so we can't retrace our origins.
Yeah. So I'm surprised how much we seem to line up in our thinking. I knew we lined up on a lot of things. I actually thought we were going to diverge more than we seem to. You seem to be saying everything, I think. So yeah, you said going back about 4,000 years, this occult system started. I've only traced it back about 2,000 years, but yeah, for at least a few thousand years, they've been trying to set up the system that they have now. They've been trying to start this new world order. As far as, people coming to the Americas, I often make the argument, where did all of the rumors of the cities of gold come from? Like those didn't originate from nothing. And now that we're doing these LiDAR scans, we're finding, they actually were seemingly, these true stories. And yes, from all of the explorers that came over here previously, there was plenty of travel going on. Yeah, I don't know. You, like I said, you surprisingly in line with my thinking, everything you're saying. So I'm right there with you, man. I agree 100% on everything you're saying.
Cool. I think that's a good sign, and at the same time, I welcome criticism because we need that to really figure this stuff out, and so yeah, if anybody listening disagrees, I'm not.
Yeah, call in and let us know.
Yeah, I'd love to hear arguments against it. But when it comes to New England and what I can see here, there are tons of examples of, we'll call them old world artifacts in the New World. One example is the Newport Tower. People are probably familiar with that. The Newport Tower was already constructed when the Europeans, quote unquote, got here, yet it doesn't resemble what we're told Native Americans were building.
Not at all. I just pulled up an image of it. Yeah, that does not look anything that we would associate with Native Americans whatsoever.
Well, and again, like I've heard really compelling evidence that Native Americans, like the Cherokees, did in fact have brick buildings. So I'm not opposed to the idea that Native Americans had masonry or even rudimentary, building techniques, because people all over the world
it's got arches in it, though.
Materials. Well, people all over the world in so-called indigenous or primitive cultures use earth and materials to build structures. So why wouldn't they be doing that in America? They have, examples of that in the Southwest with the forget the name of it, but it's like built into the cliffside itself.
Yeah.
There's cases of it, and obviously the mound sites are all earthen constructions. The conversation about the star forts, I think that's one of the few Tartaria ideas that I can see some evidence for, because
I'm not sure what to think of the star forts. Yeah.
Well, I think it's, again, Native Americans were building mounds. We can't deny that, right? Mm-hmm. Now, here's the weird thing. There are mounds that don't have burials. They don't have sacred artifacts. What they are iron forges. And we're told that the Native Americans were stuck in the Stone Age. They didn't have weapons better than bow and arrow and spear and club, right? So, but there were metallurgy going on inside some of these mounds. So what if these basically forges that they found inside of mounds in Ohio, what if that was the original technology, okay? And the Native Americans, after defeating this group of people, we'll call them, giants, because that's what they called them, but they doesn't necessarily mean they're not human. They could have just been taller than them.
Right. I fully believe in giants, but I like to think they were probably about 7 to 9 foot tall. You know,
Right.
not. You're
And
right.
there's
Right.
and there's evidence for that, like all the
Yeah.
skeletons, right? So, and again, they could be humans, right? We have people today who are that tall.
Yeah.
I'm 6'8", I'm not a
Oh
short
wow.
guy, so I can relate to, feeling like a tall outsider. But when it comes to the Native Americans, they have stories of fighting this group of people that they pushed east, right? They pushed them east towards the East Coast, and then they settled the East Coast after they defeated them. And if you look at the stone structures all along the East Coast, particularly in the Northeast, they look like what's going on in Scandinavia, Northern Europe, similar stone structures, right?
Dolmens everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, what if these groups of people that were in the north of Europe, these quote unquote heathens, pagans, like all the different groups, whether it's Celtics or the Vikings or the Gauls, like the Danes, whoever, right?
Right.
What if they were basically like a wave of people that left North America going east as a wave came and took their place, right? So the Native Americans are one wave of people, but there was a wave of beings, because they call them giants, they don't call them people, before them. They say that explicitly. There's no like ifs, ands, or buts. That's what's said by the Native Americans. We came from the Mississippi and we went east towards the sun where the sun rises, and we had to fight for many decades, but we eventually beat the giants. And so this is their story. And I don't think necessarily that means that Vikings are giants or something like that. But I think there could be a true gray area in between where there were giants and there were Europeans, because we have similarities in certain Native American languages with Celtic languages. We have place names that come from the Native American language that reflect place names in the Celtic language world, where things have been named from that language perspective, right? So, and again, the stone structures are very similar. Even the shamanistic aspects of the spiritual culture can be interpreted as similar, although anthropologists will tell you that's because, man evolves in these stages, which I think is insulting to suggest that the people of the world who are, worshiping traditional methods of religion are somehow less advanced than the people who are atheists or the people that are monotheistic. If you look at the history, how many crimes have been committed under a shamanistic religion? I don't know what Genghis Khan's religion was. He might have been a shaman, but aside from him, I think most world killers were probably not shamans. But who knows? That could be just a modern bias that I have. The Aztecs, they killed a lot of people, and they certainly practiced something that was maybe born out of shamanism, similar to, who knows, I'm not an expert in that. But, when it comes to further south into Central America, you have the Olmec heads, which many people have said, look African. They have African features, right?
It's in the chat, yeah.
This goes back, I'm not looking at the chat, by the way, but I shout out to the chat. And again, back to the Columbus thing, like, there are groups of people in the Caribbean to this day who have very dark skin. They're clearly African, right? And our explanation for that is, oh no, they're African and they came over while they were enslaved, right? So every single person with melanated skin is from Africa and also from the transatlantic slave trade, which isn't true.
Right.
We have groups of people in South America who have very dark skin who are considered indigenous. They're not considered coming from the slave trade. So how can that be, right? If all these groups of people that were, here were from one group of people that came over the Bering Strait and then just moved, right?
How did they all diverge genetically, all confined to the same landmass? Yeah.
And
doesn't make sense.
Anthropology's explanation is that there was the land bridge, and that's it. There's no other way that North and South America got populated.
Right.
But you look at all the diverse groups of people, you look at the unique aspects of culture. The Incas are very different than the Mayas and the Aztecs and the Iroquois, which that's not their proper name. But and then the Penobscot are very different from the Hopi, right? These aren't just environmental factors that are making them different. I've talked to a guy on my podcast who belongs to a group of people that science considers extinct, and when he told he worked at a university, when he told his coworkers that, oh, hey, I did a DNA test and found out that I'm Beothic. Look, you guys are wrong. The Beothic people aren't extinct. I'm a Beothic. And they're like, oh, well, you're wrong and you're fired.
So, really? Yeah. They fired him for it.
For a DNA test. And, how could he fake that, right? And
right.
He didn't it in his own lab. He sent his DNA away and they sent it back, and it matched with this group of people that's supposedly extinct in Newfoundland. The reason why they don't want to admit that they exist because they had proto-Christian aspects to their culture. Again, going back to this idea that maybe there was some pre-Columbus European influence on North America, or vice versa, where these groups of people that we now consider European actually came from North America in some way. So This is, again, the big quandary. And remember, the world did not look the way it does now before that flood that all these cultures remember. So if there was an Atlantis, if there were these old world civilizations, maybe that explains why out of nowhere these groups of people, like the ancient Egyptians, just have all this amazing stuff and this amazing culture. It's not because gods from outer space came and gave them all these secrets and did all this stuff for them and wiped their butt and said, all right, stand up. You're not toddlers anymore. You're now teenagers as far as the species is concerned. You have technology. No, it wasn't like that. We are very old. We're so old that we've died as a species and come back and have to remember the things that we did in our past species incarnation.
Right.
That's what I think it's like. I don't think it's like, this, oh, we're just still figuring it all out like academia wants to tell us. No, we've had many lifetimes as a human civilization, and the end of a human civilization lifetime comes in the form of a cataclysm. It doesn't mean every single person dies and then it's the process starts all over again from however protozoa to blah blah blah, the Big Bang nonsense, Darwinism stuff.
Right.
I think science has a truth somewhere in there, but it's more spiritual than we've been told. So again, as I'm saying this, I'm not saying that evolution isn't or is true. I just think our definition of evolution has been skewed by politics, not even religion, by politics. So that's kind of my stance, I guess, from a super macro view of what's going on in the world. I think a lot of our geopolitical events should and can be interpreted through this old lens of there's a conflict that goes back to this old civilization, this previous civilization, has something to do with our DNA, has something to do with our allegiances with other beings, and none of it is common knowledge because they don't want us to participate in that. They want us to be like the sheep while the shepherd, has his fight with his neighbors.
Yeah.
He doesn't want the sheep buying in, he'll handle the neighbor himself.
That seems to be the big question that no one has an answer to is, these groups seem to have knowledge that is very ancient. They don't want other people to have the knowledge, and I suppose that knowledge would be basically the secrets of life, universe, and gods and all of that. What is the true origin of humanity? What is the reality of gods and the nature of reality? And that's the ultimate question and the ultimate answer that they seem to be hiding from us. But what is the answer? I have no idea. You mentioned a lot of things. So I personally favor the idea, and I have very little to support this, but it just makes sense to me in my head that there was some other type of reset 6,000 years ago. So the Younger Dryas has been, accepted 12,000 years ago, but you do have this springing up of civilization 6,000 years ago with Sumeria seemingly out of nowhere. And if it wasn't the gods coming down and gifting it to them, then yeah, where are they getting it from? Did they just have a million super geniuses born all at the same time to create the civilization, or was it a restarting of some other civilization that had been reset previously? And I know a lot of people like to think, well, it's a recovery from 12,000 years ago, but that's a very large gap of 6,000 years of nothingness, to go from super advanced to nothing for 6,000 years back to pretty darn advanced with Sumeria instantly. It makes sense to me that there was something else in between those two time periods, some other civilization potentially. Yeah, I don't know. I've got little to support it. That just makes sense to me mentally,
Oh, and I think this is why the sciences that do get into the earth changes, the ways you can look at the, settling of soil and earth materials to learn like the physical, all of this has been obscured. I mean, you try to learn about some of these sciences, they make it as boring as possible. And it could be really easy. There is a cohesive way to teach people these sciences because nature conforms to the golden ratio. So things are perfectly nested in a way that can be taught through this like holographic, like this is all stuff I've been thinking about lately. So it's not really a fully formed idea yet, but it's stuff that I've been learning about this for a long time, almost 10 years now. I've been spending just like specifically thinking about this kind of stuff. You can call it perennial philosophy, but I almost think perennial philosophy has been hijacked by the same people that we can point the finger at when it comes to secret societies and manipulating world events with the occult, because it is that powerful, this perennial philosophy.
What is perennial philosophy for in layman's terms?
It's this information that's maintained from the old world.
Okay.
It's the stuff that hasn't, the things that were lost in the Library of Alexandria, so to speak, right? Like, and the theory is that it wasn't lost. Like, yeah, things were physically lost in the Library.
It was just condensed into, certain people's hands. Yeah.
Right, and that's where the Vatican possibly comes in, and these other maybe even more secret forces, because a lot of really valuable information is in private collections and things like that, I mean, yeah. Even like things that are seemingly mundane that might have like a little kernel of conspiratorial truth end up in those in that way, like in like university collections and places where people don't tend to look for that kind of stuff. And they make it hard for people to look for that kind of stuff, because when you go to these universities, you're not going to them to like figure out the world. You're going to them to learn a specific path of information.
Right.
You have a destination in mind. That destination, typically, unless you have a guy like me or you that gets like thrown into the gears of academia, usually they don't fare very well, and they end up staying in academia, because there's no other job for people who think like this, maybe podcasting. But when it comes to like the timeline and when does this stuff really like all go back, you I think you nailed it. I don't know. You said I think it's 4,000 years. You think it's 2,000 years. I'm not like set on either.
That's just as far back as I can see evidence of it. And, things get obviously foggier the further back you go, right?
Well, I think that's how long the perennial philosophy has been in their hands. But before that, it was something that was like common knowledge for anyone who could comprehend it. There's always been, stratifications of role and class in society. Not everybody is meant to be, a high priest. Not everybody is meant to be a farmer, right? These are roles that, let's say, are predestined in some way. And I almost, I was just talking to somebody about Gnosticism. I wonder sometimes if that's a part of this trap, like, playing out this story, these roles, what our culture is. Like, our culture is almost a weapon that's used against us. That's a whole nother conversation. But what if that's what it is? These archons, these invisible controllers, have set up a simulated reality for us to live in, and it doesn't seem simulated to us because we've been taught, like, this is what we need to survive. We need society. But what if there was a version of humanity that didn't conform to that? This Garden of Eden version.
These golden ages that are very often referred to in the myths and religions, yeah.
Golden age, exactly. And I think that is when you're trying to understand why the secret societies would have come to the New World with this information, like they had information about the New World beforehand. Okay, why? Because they were trying to control the energy of the land where this great empire once lived. And did they not recreate that? Look at America. Is it not the greatest country in the world like everyone thinks? Or at least for a time in my life, that was the reputation. Right. In the past 7 or 8 years, it's kind of...
The decline is surprisingly rapid, but I think we're still number one.
We're still number one. We might not have the most people, but we're in the top 3, and I think that matters. And also, like, look at the way our culture affects the rest of the world. It's undeniable. The UK tries to take credit for that, but they're not as interesting or creative as we are, I think.
Yeah, no beans on toast, man.
Yeah. No offense to our English listeners, but we got a little bit special something over here. And I think, call that like a ritual, call that like getting ahead of a prophecy. It's something like that, where they knew that if you have a group of people here at this time, you're going to be the movers and shakers of world destiny. And that's what these secret society religions are all about. They're all talking about the apocalypse, the end of the world.
Some of them seem to be trying to create that.
Yeah, bring it about because they want this, this higher group of beings, the lords, if you will, to come back and reset the table, like it says in these, not just the Bible, but other mythologies about the world, right?
Yeah, that's a pretty universal. The gods come back at the end of times is a pretty universal, another one of those universal ideas, yeah.
Well, and imagine, like, you have different factions of people who all want this to happen, but for them, right? So you have, and that's kind of like the main 3 monotheistic religions are all kind of vying for that in their own way. Yeah. But what if the Aztecs and the Mayans and like these other groups of people that lived in the Americas, what if that was their role too? And that was a part of the colonization effort. Like, no, they can't be in control of this great land on this very important time. We need to have control of this. Again, I'm not somebody who falls for the social justice warrior crap, and I run the risk of sounding like that anytime I talk about the Native Americans because
I don't think you have to me at all, and I'm
okay.
Yeah,
no, maybe I'm just insecure about it, but it is something that matters to me because I have several Native American people in my life that I've met before I've ever talked about any of this stuff that have just kind of been fundamental to like my development and who I've become. One person in particular just gave me a ton of information when it came to the spiritual world that we live in, and I can't help but think that was part of the reason why they wanted to take the Native Americans and disconnect them from the land that they're on, because they are such a centered, grounded people, at least the folks I've met. I can't
more obfuscation from the truth. It's more hiding of the story and the.
And then you get into the old world Florida conversation with Dr. Narco Longo. I don't know if you're familiar with his YouTube channel.
I don't think so.
He's done a ton of work to show that the Fertile Crescent that's described in the Bible is actually the Gulf of Mexico. And if you think about it, I mean, it looks a lot more like a crescent than the Tigris and the Euphrates does, and it's a whole lot more fertile than that part of the world is.
So I've got 3 questions for you, and you're just touching on one of them. So Quetzalcoatl, the Mormons, and the sun cycle. You can take this however you want, whichever order you want. So I'm very curious if I've made connections between Quetzalcoatl and Jesus and Christianity, or at least I've seen other people make them, and I've shared them. And I was curious if you had any thoughts on Quetzalcoatl, where he came from, what his religion and location may have been, if you have anything there. What your thoughts on the Mormons are. We're talking about America, and I'm quite ignorant of the Mormons, but it seems like a lot of the things you're talking about are somewhat at least related to their kind of beliefs. And then my third question is the sun. So we're talking about the end of times, God's coming back, these cycles of disaster. So whichever one you want to answer first, who's Quetzalcoatl? What do you think about the Mormons? And are we at the end of our cycle, or are the gods about to come back, and is the sun about to blast us?
Well, I think it's the Aztecs or the Mayans say that we live in the 5th world or something, which to them means that there will be a 6th world. So I don't think that it's the end of anything.
The end of this cycle, but not the end of just same with the Great Flood kind of deal.
Then we both agree on the definition of it. So then if we both agree on the definition of it, then I'll say I don't think that we're quite there yet. I think these things happen in very large periods of time. So 1960s, that's when they said the age of Aquarius was beginning. That's when and our whole zodiac has been skewed by some degrees, and it's not accurate anymore. But I do think that matters. That's why the ancients all had a very sophisticated understanding of astronomy and watched the sky to know about when maybe these disasters
very
would
impressive
happen.
Yeah.
So I think that has something to do with it. Again, we're in a modern world where astrology has been denigrated to something that chicks do to make sure their boyfriends are a good match and aren't cheating on them, right? This is, and maybe that's a vestige of an actual reality, because there are groups of people who in Europe, I think in the government in Poland or one of these countries that's next to Russia, the Eastern Bloc countries, their hospitals actually use natal charts to determine when a woman is most fertile, who may be the best, most compatible partner for her based on fertility and the partner's natal chart. So there is a science to this. So I wonder if, as time's gone on, they've obscured it, they've mocked it, they've degraded it.
They've done that with so many other things. It certainly wouldn't surprise me. Yeah.
Now we're not able to keep track. We're not able to call them out on when the cycle really ends. So they can start that process as early as they want, right? So if they want to create some kind of effect when the world ends, this ceremonious, serendipitous time when maybe the sun and the moon align and we have a great eclipse or some major event, right? They want to know years, decades ahead of that, so that they can get everybody performing the right, festivities, so to speak, to bring on the right effect, and I think for them to make the world as chaotic as possible will allow them to continue their power, because that's really what I think it's about, is they know that when these great resets happen, someone can usurp them. And if we're living in a perfect world where God really is managing this realm in some way, in an intelligent sort of way. I'd like to think that this is by design so that we don't end up living in some prison planet hellscape, right? So maybe their goal is to, like a good prison warden, make sure that everybody's committing as much crime as they can to justify their existence,
this
right? So
sounds right.
So if God comes back to the planet and he finds a bunch of sinners, he's like, well, shit hasn't changed that much. You guys, as bad as you are, you're a lot better than all these sinners, so I'm going to leave you in charge. Whereas, and again, if that's the case, God obviously would be intelligent enough to know all the shit that's going on, right? So I don't know that they could ever really like skirt God.
Trick God, yeah.
The analogy is starting to fall apart, but I do think that there's truth in that, whether it's as simplified and reduced as I just made it.
I think they would attempt to do it even if whether it's possible or not. So I think what you said does hold up. I think it makes a lot of sense. Whether or not God would allow it to happen, right? If he comes back, what he would do at that point, who knows? But would these groups attempt to take that control and maintain it, and with the goal of maintaining it through the next cycle? I think they would try it whether it was possible or not. So,
well, and again, like if all of these other things have been skewed, how could our definition and understanding of God also be so accurate, right? So what if it's not even God the creator as we've learned from ancient times? What if it's this God-like force, the earth vibrating at such a high level that depending on our collective vibration, we either ascend or descend, right? Like there is this Yggdrasil tree of life that the earth is an orb on, and it doesn't just statically stay in one place. As everything around it evolves, it either ascends or descends in this kind of spherical kind of way. Spiral, spiritual, spherical, right? Like this spiritual spiral, we either ascend upwards of this tree of life or we descend downwards. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe it has a energetic explanation, or not to get materialist, but like an explanation that fits in line with our physical understanding of the world. I think science again has skewed our physical understanding of the world, but in an ideal situation, God would have that understanding available to us, and I think everything would conform in a sort of, again, golden ratio, perfect nesting, holographic, however you want to define it. I haven't really figured it out myself, but I think things fall in line that way, right? So maybe that's what it's about. Maybe they know the physics of this mechanism that we're in. Again, I don't think it's all mechanistic, but maybe they know the physics of this mechanism enough to where they can hijack it, so that instead of getting into this higher vibrational golden age again, we stay in the silver age or the bronze age or the lead age, right? Because they know that they can only control the world the way they're controlling it in the lead age. That's right, where their power is. And I think that's what the Vedic knowledge talks about, is like the different qualities of human civilization during the different worlds, and how during the lead age, things get so bad right before they go to the gold age, right? Like it's not a gradual progression from lead to bronze to silver to gold. It's the opposite. It's gold, then it tarnishes to silver, then it tarnishes to bronze, then it tarnishes to black, and then it turns to gold again. Like alchemically, the same way like you and I came out of a womb. Blackness, darkness, and our DNA literally has gold in it. So there's gold coming out of the void, the blackness. So I think that's what they're doing, is they're just getting ahead of that mechanism that's so far out of our reach as a little life form. It's like one of our blood cells trying to contemplate.
I think that's their goal. Yeah. Whether they're actually accomplishing it, I don't know, but I think that is their goal. I'm going to have to pause this for just a second. I've got some chickens I need to lock up so they don't get eaten by foxes. It'll take me less than 2 minutes. Yeah, if you Quetzalcoatl or the Mormons when I get back, prepare your answer for that. I'll be right back.
Okay. Well, I'm sure there's people watching. I hope there's people watching, so I'll try to keep this interesting. Let's see. Mormons. I don't know much about the Mormons. I know they got a lot to do with Freemasonry. I know they come from the Burned Over District, which is on the Psychic Highway, which is where a lot of the American metaphysical melting pot takes place. Let's see.
Alrighty. Sorry, the show doesn't usually go this late, and I didn't want any of my chickens to get eaten by foxes, so.
Oh, it's all right, man. I do have to wrap up in a moment, so we could maybe talk briefly about Mormons, and I'd love to have you on my show to talk about Quetzalcoatl, because it seems like you know more about it than I do, and maybe we could start there and continue this conversation on my show.
Heck yeah, man. Yeah. That sounds great.
Cool. So I think the Mormons have a very important place in this whole New World takeover, right, of the esoteric landscape of America. Okay, that's kind of what I call it. And other authors, I'm not like innovating these ideas, right? I'm just kind of taking a lot of what's being talked about and written about and amalgamating them through a certain perspective. So, when it comes to ley lines or power centers in the earth, these Freemasons and different groups of people have, seized these locations to build their structures, specific structures, power centers, not just for the Freemasons, but for government and whatnot. And the Masons, they're like a Freemasonic religion, or the Mormons, they're like a Freemasonic religion. Like everybody who started the Mormon religion was a Freemason.
Yeah.
Right? Like
and they also built like the Freemasons, yeah.
Right. So you have essentially like an offshoot of Freemasonry at that point that has taken, I think it was more about taking advantage of the protections that you have as a religion within the government of the United States, right? The Constitution affords you really some benefits when you're a religion.
Yeah.
Like taxes, when it comes to, freedom to do certain things and say certain things that would have rubbed people the wrong way at a certain point in America when, yes, don't get me wrong, America's always been a metaphysical melting pot. There's always been tons of different religious beliefs, but there has been a Christian-centric sort of force always, at least not on a government level, but on a
America was founded by the WASPs, yeah.
Right. And especially in places like the South, there's a certain culture that was all about Christianity and really against other I actually come from a group of people that got pushed out of Pennsylvania for not being Quakers. So because they were Protestant, way back when, back to my family's name, on my father's side, this group of German people came to America, settled in Pennsylvania. They were Protestant, some version of Protestant. It's similar to the Amish that are there today. And they got kicked out by the Quakers. Quakers were like, no, we only want other Quakers here. So they went up to Canada where they were giving away land. Like Benjamin Franklin made some deal with the British to give away land and settle that part of Canada, which wasn't Canada yet. It was still frontier space. So anyways, all of these different religions are coalescing in America, and the Mormons, not only do they seize upon that political benefit of being a religion, but they also kind of take a lot of these ideas that we just talked about and turn them into their fundamental beliefs about how America was before they got there and why Joseph, and there are tribes that have Hebrew language aspects that, from a linguistic point of view, you can argue that these language groups evolved from Hebrew possibly. And there's also Hebrew letters inscribed in rocks. There's one in the state that I live in on a mountain. And, people don't have a good explanation for why it's there other than, some European guy put it there. But the Native Americans talk about the weird symbols on the rock. So why would they have a story about it if it was made after?
Are you talking about all the slate artifacts?
Well, those are in Michigan.
Yeah.
And those are interesting as well, especially considering they all got destroyed. But when it comes to the Hebrew inscriptions, they're on a mountain in a rock, a rock it's not it's a part of the mountain itself.
Gotcha. Okay.
So unless they took a bulldozer up to the top of this mountain, they'd have, or a jackhammer maybe, but let's not give them any ideas. But there's tons of outliers that could suggest that people from the biblical world were in America, which backs up what the Mormons kind of believe. So I don't know that means that the Mormon religion is accurate. I just think that means that they seized upon things that were in the consciousness back then and used it to create this mythology, which is really what Freemasonry is all about. It's about seeing their truth in other, they're like the original syncretists, they go around, they look at all these other religions and they see how, that's their whole thing about as long as you believe in God, you can become a Mason, right? Because to them, it's the same God behind all of these religions, okay? Which is very different than what the Christians believe. The Christians don't believe that. And that's part of the justification originally for colonialism is these people are heathens. They don't believe in Christ. We have to either kill them or make them assimilate, right? And that's a big, force still today that people are trying to reconcile is all these crimes that have been done in that name. Well, the Freemasons, they do a similar thing, assimilating, but without, I guess, the same, tactics. They kill the same way, but just, I guess they're a little more secretive.
Good at the replacing part, I suppose.
But
10 lines,
If you give me a chance to prepare, we could talk more in depth about Mormonism because it's something I know a little bit about, but not enough. But I do recognize where it connects to other things that I research. So
I just don't know what to think about it. Because there's I mean, like you were saying, there's some obvious connections. There's some obvious, they were on to something, but were they just on to something and they ran with it? And there's not really there's just these loose I really just don't know what to make of the Mormons. Honest, I don't know what to make. They're very interesting though. Yeah. So I'd love to talk about them more if you can maybe clear up my confusion with them, because they're an interesting group and I don't know what to think.
Yeah. Well, and you know, it connects to a lot of stuff, even to pop culture today. I mean, there's a reason why South Park gets away with as much as they do compared to other comedy stuff that gets censored or canceled. And they have this whole Broadway play about Mormonism. I don't think that's
very entertaining. Yeah.
Yeah, so we could talk about that. I just have to do more research so I don't feel like I'm talking out of my butt the whole time. Yeah, it's been a pleasure, brother.
Yeah, thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, no problem.
And I would love to be on your show. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, let's make it happen.
Yeah. Yeah, just email me, I guess. I'll email you. We'll figure that out. Yeah.
Done. Cool.
I'm looking forward to it. But,
cool.
All right. Well, fellas, that's another episode of Rewriting History. So thank you, Mark, for joining us, and I very much look forward to joining you.
Likewise.
All right. Well, do you want to plug anything?
Yeah, I mean, the show is titled The Goob and My Family Thinks I'm Crazy, right? So that's the name of my podcast. Just take that, copy paste it into YouTube, and you'll find my channel. Copy paste it into your browser bar, and you'll find my website. Copy paste it into any podcast app, and you'll find my
family thinks I'm crazy. There it is.
Spelled exactly as it should be in the dictionary. My family thinks I'm crazy. No hyphens, no spaces, just an apostrophe in the I'm. That's it. So yeah, gotcha. Folks should be able to find it pretty easy. I got almost 400 episodes, about 2 hours long each. Some shorter, some longer. And we talk about all kinds of crazy stuff, not just history. So I'm sure if you're listening to this, you'll appreciate my show too.
Yeah. If I can tell you, my audience definitely will. If you guys like me, you like him. It seems we're very kindred spirits. I was surprised how much we seem to think alike. So check him out, fellas. Check him out.
Cool.
All right. I'm gonna end the stream. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, brother. I gotta jump, and we'll talk again soon. I'll email you, but it was good meeting you, and we'll talk for my podcast when we can make that happen. I'll send you my calendar.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Awesome.
Brother, have a good night.
You too.